Thank you. So, welcome back to the Emergency Operations Center and Government Talks Readiness series. Today we're going to be here for session 5 that will be led by Sherry Lewis, who's the Pacific Division Disaster State Relations Director, volunteer partner for California, and me, Megan Ark, the Pacific Division External Relations Lead. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to start off with a little bit of an overview of what we've seen so far. So during our first 4 sessions, we walked you through what can be done to prepare for an assignment in an emergency operations center, a picture of an ideal response, what we'll do when we arrive to the assignment, followed by how we can start networking to build rapport in relationships. Our work groups have been established and commander's orders have been sent out to everyone who did respond to the survey form. Please reach out to me and Sherry if you signed up but have not received an email with the commander's intent. We did have a few people respond without including their information, so we believe that some of you may have been left out unintentionally, and we want to make sure we're being inclusive and getting everybody included. Again, thank you for continuing to respond to the weekly survey forms, to participate in knowledge checks, ask questions, and offer feedback. Today, we're examining meetings, specifically considering who should the meeting be with, which is a segue from last week's session on networking and relationships. Secondly, what the meeting should be about, what the actual topic is. Third, what to listen for when participating in meetings. Then what to contribute or brief out at them, what you need to make sure everybody who's sitting at that table or on that call with you needs to know. When to schedule them. Sometimes we're working with teams that are across multiple divisions, which means multiple time zones. We're also, during a disaster response, going to be dealing, as you all know, with mini meetings, so we have to be kind of strategic when we plan our meetings. So when to schedule them that works best for everybody involved, where to have them, either in person, virtual, or mixed, and then lastly, how to facilitate them. So why we're here. Throughout this series, we've explored topics to understand and fulfill the expectations of an Emergency Operations Center assignment, skills to facilitate collaboration and nurture relationships with partners, tools and resources to simplify and track information, and how networking in the EOC impacts other external relations activities and other disaster operations groups. We'll continue utilizing that model today by looking at how meetings can increase understanding of how the information we gather and share will give us the confidence needed to actively participate in and facilitate meetings with partners to collaborate and fulfill unmet needs. First, I would like to give everybody a short recap of what we've done so far. Session 1 was all about preparing for an assignment to an emergency operations center. We looked at several things that should be considered before the assignment that would prepare us for success upon arrival. Things like what partners are on the existing point of contact lists that are in place already, what partners aren't on those lists but should be, and what needs to be updated on those lists so you make sure that you have the appropriate point of contact for every activity you would need or every agency. Which agencies are collaborating, meeting, and planning at the EOC, and who we should prioritize meetings with based on the disaster response itself. Identify what tools are being used by the external relations team and the disaster relief operation. And then once you've identified those tools that are being used, if any, begin tracking your activities to share what others on your team and in leadership are doing. Then in session 2, we have been, and throughout the series, we're going to explore the listen, think, communicate mantra further by looking at how we listen to gather situational awareness to adequately prepare and think through analysis of that input, to strategically plan our communication efforts by considering the impact of each of those plans on stakeholders' interests, to better facilitate effective and collaborative conversations for efficient, interest-based problem solving. Then in session 3, we looked at the arrival to the EOC. We walked through arriving at the Emergency Operations Center confident, looking professional, and with a positive and assertive attitude. We talked about getting acquainted with the building and the location to identify all the essential areas that you'll need to function well when working in an emergency operations center. We considered what initial situational awareness should be gathered, where to find it, and who to share it with. Again, communication, it all comes down to communication. So you want to get those lines open early and share. We also discussed the importance of understanding the expectations of the assignment. And finally, we talked about making introductions and who to make them with, which is a perfect segue to our session 4, which was with Nadine McCrindle on networking and relationships. And she really did illustrate brilliantly the importance of networking and relationships. She showed us how the platinum rule can be applied to better engage with partners, the importance of closing communication loops, understanding roles, how to lean in and have fun, and how having fun can build rapport immediately with your partners and other agencies. Andrew Bogar then shared a moving story about bringing community partners together to collaborate during a disaster, but more importantly, following the disaster to be better prepared and in sync for the next response that we all know is going to come. This leads us to the topic of today's meetings, and that is Sherry's going to take us away and discuss meetings and how to run them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this series. I'm so glad to be here today to talk about meetings. On the surface, the topic of meetings sounds boring. I did become more excited as I worked my way through this presentation on the subject. I've attended some extremely boring snooze fest meetings, as I'm sure you all have. I've attended meetings where only 5 minutes of the hour reserved applied to my job or situation. I got excited because there are simple methods to facilitate better meetings that are not boring and, more importantly, value the time of the participants. Today, we're going to take a close look at those methods by asking the following considerations to plan effectively and prepare so we can facilitate with confidence using skills practiced and developed for engaging execution. We're going to ask, first, do we need a meeting? Then, who should be participating in the discussion at that meeting if we do need one? Third, what topics will be discussed at the meeting? What are we listening for at meetings? When should meetings be scheduled? How often should meetings be scheduled? How can we mobilize the discussion by using facilitative skills? Where should meetings be scheduled, or should the meeting be virtual? How much time should be reserved to accommodate the agenda? What are the desired outcomes to achieve by the end of the meeting? We're also going to consider how to listen more effectively to get more out of meetings that may not seem applicable to us or our assignment. Before we go further, we're going to listen to an expert talk about the science of meetings and how we have the power to make meetings work more effectively.
The video will not automatically play. Please click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a lowercase I. Play the video in a new window. Once it is finished, stop it, close the window, and return to this window with this session. Please pause this session now and click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you.
So after watching that video, I thought it was worth the investment of all of our time because of the following key points that resonated with me. First is how much meetings matter and how bad meetings take a negative toll on us and how they can resonate through our whole day. I've had that happen and it sucks, quite honestly. So let's think about that. And on the contrary, let's consider how meetings done right are an incredible opportunity for inclusion, innovation, and can be a phenomenal return on the investment of our time. So next, I loved how he put the responsibility on us to make our meetings better. This is true for participants of a meeting as well. As the leader of the meeting, we have a lot of say in how it's going, but we also have a say in how we participate in the meeting. Most importantly, I appreciated the stress he put on meeting leaders being stewards of others' time and how great of a responsibility that is. From our previous slide, you could see that I based the framework of our session today, and I'm going to bring that slide back up real quick, on these following questions, like he recommended for use in our agenda. It worked the same way when I planned out this session. It worked really well. So again, from that previous slide, we used the framework that Mr. Rogelberg recommended for the meeting on agendas by listing questions that needed to be answered. I hope I succeeded with this session in answering all the questions that we started with. But as recommended in this video also, I need your feedback. So at the end of this session, when I send out that survey form, please send me your feedback, because that's how I can improve. That's how we can improve all these sessions. And that's how we can actually hit on the questions that you'd like answered and the topics we'd like covered. So along with asking the questions we want answered, we also need to consider what the desired outcome of the meeting is, or outcomes. This will allow us to examine what each stakeholder's role and interest is in relation to the desired outcomes. Stakeholders are the people who need to attend. And finally, what are the specific questions we want to answer, the topics that will come up in the discussion, the known objections or obstacles, and the process for reaching the desired outcome. Reflecting on those answers will establish a guideline for how long the meeting should last in order to give all stakeholders the appropriate time to convey their interests. So, before we plan the meeting, we need to answer the most important question of all. Do we need to have the meeting? This is an important consideration that's often skipped. At times, our go-to action might be to schedule a meeting without even asking if it's necessary. So think about the following when making that decision. What is the desired outcome or outcomes of the meeting and the questions we want answered in the meeting? How many people need to influence the discussion to fulfill the purpose or meet the objective? If it's less than 3 people needed to meet the objective or purpose, maybe we do a walking meeting like was suggested in the video, or a phone call might be easier and less time consuming for everyone. So remember, a meeting is not always necessary. When we have decided it's necessary, let's look at some best practices about the meeting invitation. So we've talked a lot about walking into a room with confidence being easy when you have a plan. Meetings are the same way. When you have a plan, they're easy to facilitate and they're easy to stay on track. So we've decided a meeting is necessary. Now we're going to look at the following. Who should be invited that will directly influence the collaboration necessary to reach the desired outcomes? Only invite key people. People who don't have an interest or knowledge of the subject matter will throw you off track and slow you down. We also need to look at when should the invite be sent. That's based on the urgency of the desired outcomes. So if it's something that has to be decided tomorrow, well, you need to meet right away. If it's something that, oh, we're planning 6 months down the road, plan it appropriately. You have plenty of time to give people advance notice. So how to send the invite should also be considered. Sometimes it makes the most sense to send them out using multiple methods. So for this series, we send an email following each session, and then we send a reminder before each session. Additionally, people who come back session after session, it should show up on your team's calendar. So reach out to us if it's not. Also, we want to look at what to include in the invite, and that depends on the desired outcome of the meeting. But the topic and outcome should always be included in that invitation. Include a brief description of what the meeting is about and what the desired outcomes are. Include an agenda always if you can, but it's essential to include if the meeting is going to run longer than an hour. You need to give everyone a breakdown of what that meeting is going to be about, all of the different things you're going to cover, especially if they're investing that much of their time. Finally, where should the invite be sent? In most cases, it's going to be sent via email and Teams if it's a virtual meeting. It may also be appropriate to reach out with a phone call or a text message to confirm a participant has received the email invitation, especially if the meeting is scheduled on short notice. A phone call ahead of time also offers an opportunity to discuss potential obstacles that that participant may have that could impact the flow of the meeting. And it also gives you an opportunity to confirm the engagement that's expected from that person at the meeting. So we've decided a meeting is necessary and we've considered the desired outcomes. So when should the meeting be scheduled? Everyone is busy and has a schedule full of meetings like we saw in that video. I was totally shocked by the statistics. So the more advance notice possible is preferred. Sometimes meetings must happen urgently. It's important to consider some factors to determine the urgency and how soon a meeting should be scheduled. This is especially difficult at times when you're in an emergency operations center and everything can seem urgent. So let's look at some questions that can help us determine the urgency. First, is the meeting to discuss and determine a course of action to fulfill an unmet need? In most cases, that's true during steady state or disaster. So if it is true, we want to look at who's impacted by that need. It's important to consider how many people are impacted and also if anyone in the impacted population has access and functional needs. I bring that up because we may want to bring other subject matter experts into the conversation. We also may want to bring translation into the conversation if we have people that are coming from multiple cultures and speak different languages. Again, we want to make our meetings inclusive and productive. That means they accommodate everyone, all the stakeholders that are invited. So when should the needs be met? This is another thing that we need to consider. Do the needs need to be met tomorrow, later in the week, sometime in the distant future? It's something that we want to tackle, but not urgent. Or is this something that demands everyone's attention right now? Is it urgent? So let's talk about where the meeting should be held, or if it should be a virtual meeting. So virtual meetings have been the norm for pretty much the last couple of years because of COVID. We've all learned a ton of virtual meeting tools like the one we're using today, Teams, and a lot of other useful things. There are great benefits, and there's also a lot of downsides to the virtual environment. Meetings can be scheduled almost immediately to address urgent needs in a virtual environment, and that's definitely a bonus. When there's issues that need to be discussed by people from multiple geographic areas and they can't all come together in one room, the virtual environment is ideal. During my past several deployments to emergency operations centers, even before COVID, the location has usually been a mix of in-person and virtual. An example of that is when we're at the State Operations Center and the task force is activated. Each day, we have meetings with all of the counties that have operational areas impacted by disaster or disasters. There's no way all of those people from all of those counties, 58 in the state of California, are going to come to the State Operations Center for that meeting each day. So we have the task force in person. but we have all of the county participants on the phone with us. So when considering a physical location, especially if the meeting is hybrid, a mix of in-person and virtual, the room must be quiet. Ideally, in-person participants are spaced out to comply with any physical distancing recommendations, but close enough to the microphones to pick up all of the audio for the virtual participants. Likewise, there needs to be enough speakers placed throughout the room so that everyone physically present can hear those that are reporting out virtually or on the phone. So it's important the space provides appropriate amount of privacy for the participants so they can discuss confidential matters if necessary. And then again, preparation is essential. Prepare the space or room for the meeting ahead of time. Make yourself a checklist to verify that the room is suitable for the meeting, has all of the necessary gadgets and tools, screens, monitors, anything that you might need that you plan on to present effectively. So wedding planners probably agree that invitations are vital to attendance and participant engagement. Probably also really important to the gift that they bring to the reception table. So people attending meetings, it's really no different. They're more likely to attend, to engage, and to bring their talents to the table when they know what the meeting's about. So they want to know what they're about in order to willingly invest their time and engage in them. Meeting preparation is essential. The invitation is a piece of that preparation that conveys the information to participants in an intriguing and thought-provoking way. The participants should have a clear understanding of why they're being invited to participate in the discussion, and more importantly, what might be expected of them. As a meeting facilitator, it is your responsibility to give participants all the resources, background, and tools they need to arrive to the meeting confident and prepared to engage in the discussion. This is an actual invite that I sent out to Team Rubicon and Red Cross team members for a meeting that will confirm plans made at the 2 previous meetings. The invite includes the links to the videos of the 2 prior meetings, a list of the items our next meeting is scheduled to cover, and a link to the next meeting. This way, all that the participants may need to reference at the next meeting is already at their fingertips. They don't have to search through their email or files to find it. This gives the meeting a better chance of starting on time and staying on track. So now we're going to review why an agenda is important, how to create one like a pro. And we're going to watch a short video to do that. I'm going to turn off my video so that it streams better. Again, I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if there's for any reason you cannot see it stream through the meeting, please go ahead and click on that link in the chat.
The video will not automatically play. Please click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a lowercase I. Play the video in a new window. Once it is finished, stop it, close the window, and return to this window with this session. Please pause this session now and click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you.
Agendas, simple but very impactful when done correctly. So let's review for a few moments. We've covered being prepared. We looked at the importance of promoting engagement by answering 2 questions for all participants: why they're there and what they're expected to do. Use verbs, and as mentioned in the earlier video, questions to outline the purpose or desired outcomes of the meeting. Keep the agenda simple and easy to read by using bullet points. Using a strong agenda will help the meeting start on time and stay on track. Another personal tip that works for me is to make sure that links to any resources or tools being discussed at the meeting are embedded within the agenda and the invite. Additionally, throwing them in the chat makes your meeting that much more productive and easy for participants if it's a virtual meeting. So we covered what we want to do at the meeting with our agenda, and how we want to prepare for the meeting, as important as things we do are the things we need to avoid. So we've talked about who to invite, but it's as important not to invite too many people. People that don't have a stake in the conversation can cause distractions or migrate the discussion to something that is applicable to them and steer the group away from the meeting objectives established at the beginning. So another thing is, don't just meet to meet. Remember, is the meeting essential? We learned how many meetings we all attend each day, and we don't need to add any more just for the sake of meeting. Having a clear agenda will help the meeting outcomes, and it'll help you determine how much time to reserve for the meeting. Do not block out more time than is necessary to meet the objectives. Remember the Parkinson's law that was referenced in the first video about filling time because it is allotted. Work will expand if there's time allotted for that work. So put a little bit of pressure on your team and say, no, we have 30 minutes to get to this decision or to meet these objectives. It makes things more productive and keeps people more on track. Again, you're stewards of people's time, which is extremely valuable. So understanding types of meeting participants are essential to facilitating effectively. Having strategies where you can authentically redirect participants who are steering the discussion away from meeting objectives are essential to keeping the meeting on course. We're going to watch another video, it's a short one, that portrays different personality types in a humorous way, so hopefully it'll make you smile. These personalities are a bit exaggerated to make us laugh, but I'm sure you're going to recognize the traits in a lot of us, and hopefully you can do some self-reflection if one of these traits mirrors what you see in yourself at times. So think of strategies you would use to redirect people who may be leading the meeting off course. And again,
the video will not automatically play. Please click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like a lowercase I. Play the video in a new window. Once it is finished, stop it, close the window, and return to this window with this session. Please pause this session now and click on the link in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you.
The video clearly showed examples of how meetings can go wrong and how important the job of the facilitator is to keep the meeting focused on the topics to be discussed in order to meet the objectives outlined in the agenda. As essential is understanding the interests of the stakeholders in the meeting and how their personalities may steer the conversation. We're going to cover specific strategies to interject when behavior is disruptive during future sessions on facilitation. For the purposes of today, I wanted to emphasize the importance of inviting the right people to the meeting. To preempt unwelcome behavior, it's effective to establish ground rules. The meeting will run more smoothly and set the stage for successful participation. First, we all need to agree to listen to one another. That's a given. Next, respect and record all ideas. Don't use the crazy scribes method of that elusive of shorthand. Everyone should have an opportunity to speak and present their interests if they help meet the objective. And again, that's why it's important to invite the right group of people based on the topics being discussed and the objectives that you want to meet by the end of the meeting. Decisions should be made by consensus if those decisions are going to be made at the meeting. And additional ground rules may need to be established and are appropriate should they be decided upon and agreed by the group. So, hot topics can make for engaging discussion, but it's essential to consider how many topics can actually be covered during a meeting. It's important to allow enough time for the discussion of each topic on the agenda. So consider the following questions to determine how to prioritize which topics to discuss and for how long of a period to discuss them. So let's look at each question. First, what must be discussed? What topics can be pushed to a later meeting? And what decisions must be made today, soon, versus down the road? And then consider, Is one topic too big for a single discussion? Should one topic be broken down into subtopics to allow for more targeted discussions in smaller groups at different meetings? So far, we've talked a lot about how to plan for, lead, and facilitate meetings. We're also responsible for being good participants. At meetings that don't seem pertinent to the Red Cross operation, it takes a lot of patience and a lot of coffee sometimes to listen for the nuggets of information buried within the repetitious reporting. At times, there's information that is helpful to the operation that we're not aware of. It doesn't seem relevant to us, but it can be relevant to someone else that we're working with. More often, it's an opportunity to hear the names of people who we may need to collaborate with going forward. At other times, there might be information that we need to record in notes. We hear it, we can't tie it together with the operation, but because we don't have all the pieces necessary to assemble the whole operating picture. But again, someone we're working with, leadership on the job, they may need or be able to use that little nugget of information to do what they need to do more effectively. So it's always important to take good notes and listen from multiple perspectives. Listening for opportunities to facilitate conversations between partners to satisfy needs is another critical role we play in emergency operations centers and throughout the community. Listening at an emergency operations center is what led Andrew to understand the dire need for bringing together the community partners that were meeting the bulk of the needs throughout the county most impacted by the floods in Washington. At the last session, I described the meeting as magical. And I know that sounds a bit too whimsical for our conversation about emergency operations centers, but the merging of the two forces will offer those communities they serve so much more together than they could ever do on their own. Red Cross only played a part in bringing the two together so that a shared vision could be imagined. Listen for those opportunities because they may be more impactful than any individual effort a single agency could perform on their own. So it was magical to witness that, and I hope that they take advantage of the relationship they started to move forward and help their community thrive that much more in their recovery phases. Gathering and sharing situational awareness at meetings is expected during an assignment to the emergency operations centers and in the community when you're doing community engagement and partnerships. We've talked a lot about facilitating meetings, but most often we're actually participants. Emergency support functions, which we've touched a little bit on, and we will go into further detail in future sessions on, they represent the different job functions required to support the emergency services provided throughout the operational areas. Each ESF will report out along with the other operations departments during meetings led by the Operations Center Director a lot of times, but it could be others led in the Emergency Operations Center. And a lot of what is reported is by the different ESFs. They may not directly apply to our mass care operation or our mission, but collaboration with those agencies may be required to fulfill needs. So don't walk away without listening and noting what has been reported. Another essential part of attending meetings is briefing out what the Red Cross has done to support the mission, what Red Cross is in the process of doing, and how we're collaborating with partners to meet those needs. I like to choose 3 points to share. A lot of times I will use the method by asking or by answering what Red Cross has done so far, what Red Cross is doing, and one example of partner collaboration to satisfy a need. Other times, if there's not a lot of activity or things happening, but I do feel like I am expected to brief out, I will share the talking points that the public affairs team has distributed throughout the disaster operation. So look for easy ways to report out that are relevant and consistent with the rest of the messaging that is going out from the operation. So tracking the progress of the meeting will help you honor the block of time reserved for the meeting. Remember, when we're leading the meeting, we're stewards of other people's time. I would say this is true as a participant as well. We need to be thoughtful of how we're contributing to a discussion to make sure that what we're adding is relevant and not just so that we can be heard. This is essential in an operations center because meetings often go from one to the other without a break in between. Don't count on the option of participants being able to stay longer than what was scheduled. Some questions to consider throughout the meeting to keep you on track are whether the meeting is on schedule. Have the discussion stayed on topic? Should another meeting be scheduled to cover a topic more thoroughly, or should we create subtopics? Does the agenda need to be modified in order to accommodate a productive discussion or for progress? And will the group benefit more from staying on track per the agenda or by modifying the agenda to accommodate engaging discussion that's in process? Does it make sense to ask the group to decide about modifying the agenda, or does it make sense just to advise them of the change without discussion about it? Because again, it's all in the essence of time. Speaking of the essence of time, I was going to show another short little video wrapping up what we've discussed today, but we're not going to do that because I don't want to take us over our 2 o'clock mark. I will share that video out with the follow-up email. And again, it's just a quick little recap of what we've discussed today and how to have an effective meeting. It's a fun little quick 3-minute video though. So there are multiple ways also we talked about redirecting participants who may be leading the discussion off the primary topic and taking our meeting off track. So we're going to explore, again, specific tactics and ways in future sessions, but I wanted to remind you that asking for agreement or asking questions is the first and easiest method to redirect. And sometimes that can be a better option than not talking about a topic or not taking the necessary time to meet the objectives of the meeting. So another useful method for staying on track is to present an agenda that's visible to the meeting to check off items as you progress through them. It communicates to all the participants how the meeting is moving along and whether it's on track or not. So like we've covered at all the other previous sessions, documenting and sharing is essential to your assignment. After meetings, it's required to follow up with a recap of the meeting that includes any decisions that were made, action items that were assigned to people, and what the next steps are beyond completion of the action items. Determine which tools are being used by external relations team and the operation so you can start tracking all that you do, those you meet with, outcomes from the meetings you led or the ones you attended, and what requires follow-up. Be sure to update the points of contact workbook so it includes any people that you've met with or attended meetings with. Share the information with the external relations team and with leadership. So I'd like to conclude our discussion on meetings with a few important points I hope I've convinced you are true. The first is meetings don't have to be boring. Meetings can be facilitated to meet predetermined objectives. Meetings can be engaging and entertaining. Meetings can stay on track. Remember, meetings done right are an incredible opportunity for inclusion, innovation, and are a fantastic return on the investment of our time. I look forward to the next meeting you invite me to see if you use some of these tips. Now, Megan's going to take the last couple of minutes to quickly walk us through a recap of what we've covered in the series so far and what's coming up next week. And I'm putting the link to that video in the chat. I look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday. Ciao.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and that was an amazing presentation. I'm going to leave my camera off because I'm still having bandwidth issues. And Sherry, if we could skip to slide 31 since we have 2 minutes left. So for next week, we're going to be covering situational awareness. We touched upon it today as it relates to what we're listening for when we're attending meetings, understanding the information we receive, what information is important, and how that information applies to the unmet needs addressed by Red Cross with our partners. We're going to dig into it further to understand more clearly what to do when the information we gather, so it lands in the hands of those making decisions the information could influence. Here is our contact information again on slide 32. Don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us or both of us if you have any questions about anything throughout this series, or if you have ideas to share that you think would make the sessions even better. And then that's going to bring us to the end for this week's session. Remember to watch for and participate in the survey form we'll be sending out following this session. Thank you again so much for attending, and we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you.